Good evening, everybody. It's now 7 o'clock and I'd like to start this meeting of the Corporate Parenting Committee. I'm Councillor Arnold, first time out tonight, so be gentle. And I'm the chair of this committee. I'd like to remind everyone present that this meeting is being live streamed, so it will be available on the council website. And if you wish to leave the room at this point, now is your time. Officers attending on the Teams, can you please just raise your hand when you want to speak, and then Kenna will indicate to me when, just let me know that you do actually want to speak. Item 1, do we have any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. We've got apologies from Councillor Polly and Councillor Watson.
Okay, thank you. And item 2, minutes. I move that the minutes of the Corporate Parenting Committee held on the 6th of September be approved as a correct record. Are there any comments on the accuracy of the minutes? Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome to your new role.
Thank you.
Firstly, I would like to say at the last Corporate Parenting Committee, we were promised, we said a report from NELFT would be coming in January, and it's actually written on page 9 of the minutes, but I cannot see that here. Is anyone able to provide an explanation as why that's not here?
Anything, Kenna?
Chair, I think that report is, I think it is on the agenda. I think it's the joint report. I think it's actually under item 8. I think it's the joint health report. Dan might be able to give a bit more information on that.
There's 2 reports from Health today. So one is a joint report on initial health assessments, which has contribution from NELFT, and then the CLA health report, which is also from NELFT. So that should cover it.
What we did ask was a report from NELFT, specifically as they had taken more taxpayers' money from the council to get the IHA's figures a bit better, that they're completed in time. So I think what the committee was asking for was a report from NELFT. I don't know if that's the view of the rest of the committee, but it was certainly the view of myself.
So my understanding was that NELFT were going to produce a report which is around initial health assessments, and so something was tabled for health and well-being, and that report was done by NELFT, and we also contributed to it, and I think that's what's in the pack. And so there was a conversation about what they were doing to try and improve the initial health assessments. I think that is covered in the pack, but if not, we can always go back and have that conversation with NELFT if there's something additional that's not covered here.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, on that, can I just ask for the minutes to be approved? Is that okay? Can I have a little vote? Yep, thank you very much. Item 3, are there any items of urgent business? And I don't believe there is. No, there isn't. Declarations of interest. Does anyone have to declare a declaration of interest, please? Nope. I've also had a request now, we're moving into the reports. I've had a request that we move item 10, which is the annual report for virtual school head teacher children looked after, to make that the first item on the agenda. So with that, can I ask, can I ask Keely Pullin to present her report, please? Thank you.
Can everybody, yeah, you can hear me. Hello, good evening. My name's Keely Pullen. As I've just been introduced, I'm the head teacher of the virtual school for children looked after and previously looked after children. Thank you for letting me go early. It's just in case I need to leave due to a health issue. So my section actually starts on page 125 of the documentation, and there is also an appendix document, which was Appendix 1. I'm basically going to go through the overview, and then I will welcome any questions that people may have, if that's okay. Okay, so the first section of the report goes through basic contextual information about the school role. So the virtual school is a statutory school role which we have to have as a council, and we have a wide and varied remit for the pupils that we cover. So for our children looked after, we cover children aged between 3 and 18 years. And for our previously looked after children, we offer an information, advice and guidance remit, and these will be for children of any age from 0 through to 18. We have recently, in the last year, had additional duties that have been provided to the virtual school head teacher, which covers children with a social worker. So these children will not be looked after, they will have some social care involvement, for example, through a child in need plan or a child protection plan. And again, that's a strategic post, and I will explain a little bit further as I go through the report about where we are with that as well. So the cohort numbers remain fairly fluid. There was a slight decrease in the academic year. So I'm currently reporting on the academic year 21-22, which covers the 1st of September 21 through to the end of August 2022. So we have a fluctuating picture in terms of our cohort figures as we go through, but mainly we've had a decrease of our children who are looked after of school age. Our special needs data has remained fairly the same. We generally just about have our children who have either a SEND support plan or they might have an educational healthcare plan. We generally have lower figures than the national average. National average is approximately 55% of children who are looked after having a SEND need. My figures for my school cover about 49% at any one time. Most of our children and young people attend mainstream education if they have a special educational need, and that data has been provided for the types of provision that our young people and children attend. But the majority of them have their needs met within a mainstream environment. If we look at the exclusion data, we have managed to maintain our 0% for permanent exclusions. Nationally, this is also a very low figure. It's something like 0.03%. And we have also managed to reduce our fixed term exclusion. So a fixed term exclusion is if a child or young person has had half a day off, 5 days, where they've not been able to attend school due to perhaps a behaviour difficulty that they've exhibited and the school has excluded them. But we are very pleased with the fact that we have managed to reduce it to 85 sessions last year. But we do need to keep making sure that we look at that as a service to ensure that as many children as possible are going to school and that their needs, behaviourally and socially and emotionally, are met within their environment. When we look at that work, it's quite a broad area of work that we cover with our schools to do that, because it's about having inclusive behaviour and inclusive approaches within the school environment to support our children and young people's needs. We can also see, if we look at our attendance data has improved. The impact of COVID-19 has reduced in that academic year. What is worth noting, however, is the year prior to that, although our attendance figures were lower, we had a high proportion of children who were being marked as authorised absence due to being unwell due to COVID and other self-isolation procedures, etc. What we have found that although our attendance overall has improved, when we look at our unauthorised attendance, that has actually increased, which is not something that we want. Basically, a pupil is provided with an unauthorised attendance if the school has not approved their absence. So if we look at, for example, a reason why a pupil might not go to school, it could be that actually they have decided that they didn't want to attend that day, or it might be that they have something else that's happened, although most of those incidences do tend to be authorised. For example, if they've had an urgent contact or an urgent appointment somewhere. What we have decided to do, because attendance is always a focus, and we actually always have very good attendance data as a virtual school. We usually compete quite well against our statistical neighbours, as well as generally children looked after. The year before, we were actually number 1 in the country for the lowest unauthorised absence rates. So actually, what we're trying to do is address those issues. And the reason why we've had an increase in unauthorised absence was due to a number of pupils who were persistent absentees. So basically, they had below 90% attendance. I'm going to move on, and because I'm aware it's a very packed agenda, I'm going to move on to talk about attainment. So I report for attainment across the key stages for our children and young people, and there is certain data that is a statutory reporting mechanism that we have to do. I have included additional data. So let's look at our Year 1 data, first of all, for our children who took part in the phonics screening. So the phonics screening is something that happens every June in every year, although COVID stopped that. And so the children who were in Year 1 took their Year 1 phonic test when they were in Year 2 last year. They all passed, I'm pleased to say. And for our Year 1s, they achieved really high scores, which were above the national average and the Thurrock average as well. I've put this down to the fact that we've invested a lot of resources for our younger pupils. So starting in nursery through to Year 2, we've actually been providing our foster carers with additional phonics resources so that the children are able to work at home, play games, and get their awareness of reading those and decoding those words. If we look at our Key Stage 2 data, we have had incredible results this year, particularly in terms of progress. We've really done very well with our grammar, punctuation and spelling, and also with the reading. We are above children looked after nationally, and we are definitely closing the gap against non-looked after pupils. I believe that the reading has been a strength due to the fact that we've been providing those early additional resources historically, but also because we provide additional reading guidance and materials at home. We have also had a programme of tuition for those children as well, so that they were receiving additional tuition in the home. Progress has been a really positive part of our Key Stage 2 SATs results, and hopefully the data and the diagrams that have been provided speak for themselves. So we've been very pleased with that. I'm going to move on to Key Stage 4 now. So these would be our Year 11 pupils. So we can see from the data, and I've provided historical data as well, and in 2022 we had official exams commenced again after the pandemic. So I'll explain a little bit about Progress 8. So I'll talk about Attainment 8 first. So Attainment 8 is the accumulation of grades that a young person receives for each of their GCSEs that they take. And then people who are very into data, and the Department for Education, work it all out, and they give the pupil an attainment 8 data, so because it's adding them all up and dividing them. Our attainment 8 data overall is improving. That's looking really positive, and I do believe that's because we are providing additional tuition, and we're using Pupil Premium Plus to provide that. And this is having a knock-on effect on the Progress 8 data. So the Progress 8 data is where it compares prior attainment, so at Key Stage 2, and then their attainment that they achieve at the end of Key Stage 4. So it measures them from when they were in Year 6 through to Year 11 and calculates their progress. If we were looking at an ideal figure, we'd be looking at a Progress 8 of 0, or even plus would be even better. But you can see from the data that I've provided that data is starting to move in a good direction towards that 0, which is what we're trying to achieve. Our overall attainment has been very good, particularly in English, but there are areas that we'd like to work on, particularly if we look at our maths data for those young people. So let's have a quick look at Pupil Premium Plus. So we are provided with a Pupil Premium grant that comes from the Department for Education. And the bulk of this funding is devolved to schools because they are the professionals that we feel are best served to use that money to support the needs of every individual child. But what we do is we also top slice some of that amount. So the schools receive £1,800 across the year, and we top slice the remainder to then fund things such as the tuition, the resources, etc. that I've been discussing previously. We found that the major impact has been of the spending, the tuition. I think that the attainment data reflects on that, particularly when we need to bear in mind the disruption that our young people have had to their education as a result of COVID-19. But we were very committed to making sure that these gaps were addressed as part of the tuition funding that we provided. This is not something that every virtual school in the country does. This is something that we've been able to be committed to, and I'm really pleased that we're seeing positive results. I'm now going to quickly move on to the children with a social worker role. This was a role that was announced in the June of 2021. It's a non-statutory set of guidance, but they brought it into effect in the September of 2021. It didn't give virtual school head teachers much of a chance to get up to speed with things, but we did know that it was coming as a national association. We knew it was going to happen. As I say, it isn't statutory at the moment. What we were able to do with the additional grant funding was we were able to employ additional staff to project manage this particular aspect of our role. And we have been taking a number of actions because what we need to do now is work with a completely different set of professionals, particularly in social care, whereas we've normally had those relationships and those ways of working and expectations with our children looked after and aftercare teams. We've now had to incorporate another set of professionals to explain what we're trying to achieve. The funding has also been able to provide additional resources to Thurrock schools. So, as I said before, we're looking at children with a social worker who are CIN, child in need, or subject to a child protection plan. And it also covers children that may have had a social worker. and it covers children and young people from 0 through to 18. So it's a vast number of pupils, and it's a vast number of professionals and people that we're trying to reach. At the moment, because it isn't statutory, I am welcoming any statutory direction that we actually have, because I think that will give us more teeth, really. The roles that we have for children looked after are statutory, and that's something that we are able to enforce. I know the Department for Education are looking at how they're going to move forward with this project. We have had further funding for this year as well, and I've been able to expand the project. We've provided a range of training to Thurrock schools. We've provided a range of reading materials and also online training, as well as online inclusive packages. If you remember, I was talking about fixed term exclusion before. We're trying to reduce fixed term exclusion for every child. We're trying to have inclusive behaviour and a trauma-informed approach for every child and young person in Thurrock. And so the work that we're able to do with this additional funding is reaching those schools that perhaps we're not working with at that particular time, because they don't have a child looked after there, but they certainly would have children that have a social worker. So this is a relatively new project, but it's really quite exciting, and I hope that I can explain a little bit further along the journey as time goes on, and get some impact and data and things for your perusal. So I welcome any questions now. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Keely. That was a very full and detailed report, version of your report. I must confess, this is a topic that's sort of fairly new to me. And I think actually afterwards I will actually be requesting some special training on this. I know over the last couple of months I've been paying different services, different visits, and trying to gain knowledge, but this is hugely complex and technical, isn't it? And I must admit, when I first got the agenda sort of leading up to Christmas, I knew this one was going to be the challenge to actually try and get into. Like I say, I do thank you for that. I've actually got a couple of little comments and a question before I open it up to members, if I can. And again, like I say, I am coming onto this as a fairly new person on this topic. Am I right in thinking that the service it provides the education and health plan after assessing the child, and it determines the best type of education delivery, etc., for mainstream school, residential, etc. A bit like with Parents' Evening receives the feedback from the school on the child's progress and alters plans as necessary, and also supports the education staff to support the child. So I'm just trying to I was just trying to write down on paper for myself, okay, what, in the very broadest sense, what this service actually does.
So my service doesn't actually deal with that part. That's our special educational needs service. But we do have lots of overlap, because there are approximately 61 pupils with an educational healthcare plan, and approximately 50 pupils that have been identified as requiring additional SEND support within their schools. Not every looked after child has a special need. In fact, I mean, well, in my opinion, all children have a special need and they should all be treated as individuals. But that's just my educational philosophy. But not all of our children do. Some of them are able, very able, and achieve really well. So what we do is we're kind of the bridging, I guess, between perhaps social care and the special needs department. So if we've had a young person come into care aged 12, 13, and they've had quite a turbulent attendance or quite a turbulent time prior to being in care, they've been moved about a lot because the family's moved, and they might have a need that hasn't quite been addressed. The school might have assessed them, and then they may have left and gone to a different school, and then that's all started again. So we work very much with social care, with the school, with with our special needs department to say, actually, we think there is a difficulty here. What assessments need to take place? We will provide advice, we'll challenge people, etc. So that's our role, the advisory and the challenge. And then we'll provide liaison and guidance and sometimes very practical help in how those needs can be met. And then depending upon how that is, I mean, we've had some really good, successful journeys for young people where they've had huge gaps in their learning, but because we've worked very successfully with the school, they've brought them up and they've not needed an educational healthcare plan. But there are some where we've had to go down that journey, and so we'll support the carers, the school, whoever's needed to make sure that that plan is fit for purpose. We'll then liaise with whichever SEND department, because not all of our children are in borough, so we may well be working with other SEND departments across the country. We'll liaise with them to make sure the plan meets need, and then we will discuss our opinions and our professional judgment about what provision is best needed. But I've tried to put it as simplistic as I can, really, not, but without giving a really long-winded answer, which I'm prone to do, as Janet will know. So that's kind of what we do with that. If we have some of our children or young people that maybe need to move setting, we will provide our professional opinion. My team are all qualified teachers. I was a real head teacher before I was a virtual head teacher. So we have a vast amount of practical experience as well as the theoretical background and knowledge. So we will use that information that we have and support, and indeed, if we need to, challenge the professionals we're working with to say what provision is best suited. And as we all know, it needs to match their need.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think the best thing for me to do is actually watch this back, isn't it, online tomorrow? There's an awful lot there, isn't there? I've got one little question, again, just before I open it up, and it's from page 128. It's 3.3 of the attendance. We've got 92 categorised SEND children. It's 35 of whom have persistent absence. And I know you've touched on this. That's nearly 40%. With less than 90% attendance. I appreciate there are many underlying traumas affecting attendance, but is there ever a deep dive being done in to find out exactly why? And do we need to give this more focus?
Bear with me, I'm just trying to find the relevant part. So yeah, we had 35 pupils, not 35%. So we had 35 pupils from the whole virtual school. So those aged from reception through to year 11, we had 35 with persistent absence. Now, prior to COVID, we would have very small numbers of persistent absence. It used to be the fact that we had 1 or 2 pupils per term where we'd go, oh, they're not going to school very much, and we'd put some intervention in and it would work. Unfortunately, since COVID, national figures for attendance have declined and more pupils. So, for example, our children who have been electively home educated, those figures for Thurrock have doubled in a very short period of time. So if those young people have felt too anxious to return back to school and actually they've preferred to do home learning, their parents have been able to make that choice. We don't allow that choice because they're looked after and they need to be in school. So where we may have 1 or 2 children each term, which we could fix quite easily, I would say, looking back historically, those figures have increased to 35 in the last academic year. We don't have as many this year because we've been working quite intensively with those children that were struggling, but that's not to say that we still are not encountering some difficulties. And it is mainly because of their social and emotional well-being. It's not a matter of the fact that they are not being provided for within school and they're not being supported in school, it's sometimes actually they would prefer to not go to school and then try to do what they want to do in the daytime, really. And I do think we are dealing with the legacy of when we first had lockdowns, there wasn't any guidance for schools. It was, if you can provide education, that's great. If you can't, you know, don't worry. But I think, and our young people have had to go back to the fact that they are back at school now and everyone's back at school, and that's how it is. But it is challenging. And that's why for this year in particular, I mean, as I said, we have a focus every year to improve attendance, and it's usually very effective. But one of our key school priorities this year is again to address what can we do even more to improve attendance. So that might be commissioning additional mentoring, it might be provision of an alternative education. So we're really trying to creatively think about how their needs can be met with the same time of trying to instill that discipline and routine.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, that's very, very detailed, and I think I will obviously be after some training after this, I think, to get a proper full understanding and maybe, like you say, deep dive into this. Has any other councillors got any questions, please? Councillor Carter.
Thank you very much for your report. There's a lot of very positive data in here. I'm loving to see how Thurrock is doing so well against its statistical neighbours. I would just like a bit more information on one area. I did have the page open, but I seem to have lost it in a couple of seconds, but I think I knew the area. Yes, so page 170. And on page 169 before, it's the spending overview. And I was just curious, that figure for tutoring, how many people did that cover for one-to-one sessions?
Okay, so without the data being completely in front of me for those, because I've given you an overall picture, we had, so at any one time we have our year fives being provided with tuition. So that would equate to approximately 14 young people. And at the same time, we'd be having our year sixes having tuition. So we started tuition early, and we started it earlier last year. So normally we wouldn't start till maybe the summer term of year five, but we actually moved that back. So we had approximately 14 year fives having tuition and approximately 14 year sixes having tuition as well. So that's 28, but that's 2 hours per week at £48 per hour. So that's where a lot of our money is spent. Then when we look at our year 10s, there's usually about 25 year 10s at any one time having tuition, and they're offered tuition in maths, English and science. And at the same time, so that's 1 hour per week for, you know, if they want it in the holidays, they can have it in the holidays. So again, that's £48 per hour per pupil per week. And then we would usually have, I mean, it depends on cohort sizes. We'd usually have between 20 and 25 year 11s having GCSE tutoring as well. But running parallel to that offer, we are also providing tuition to children that perhaps do not have a school place. So they may have come into care and had to move provision. So within 10 days, we start providing 15 hours of tuition per week for those pupils. So if you look at my children missing education data, you'll see that actually, you know, if you've got 10 children at that particular month, 10 of those children will be having 15 hours per week. We also had, what we generally find, usually in about the spring and summer term, how unaccompanied asylum-seeking young people start to enter our country. So what we do for those is, because they're generally year 11 and it's very difficult to get them a school place at that time of year, particularly if they don't enter the country till April and actually GCSEs start in May. We'll provide English as an additional language tuition as well for up to 15 hours per week. So at any one time, I would say a conservative estimate, I've got to try and add all these numbers up now. At any one time, I would say we're probably having, and not all children have every single week, but it's probably between 40 and 50 children per week. But over the course of a year, you're probably looking at maybe 75 pupils have had that intensive tuition. But then we also provide additional tuition for those that might need it as a stopgap as well, if they need an extra boost for something.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Raper.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. Can I just ask, do the people that provide one-to-one tuition, have they all got QTS?
In theory, they should have. One of our providers doesn't provide, they're not all qualified teachers, no. So that's something that we're actually addressing because of commissioning arrangements. So there have been a certain amount of tuition companies that have been given the tender, not by myself, that's been made a different layer of decision making, and they are not necessarily providing qualified teachers. For the subject specific ones, they do tend to be. So if I'm asking for a science teacher, they do tend to have QTS, but not every single one, not particularly not with teaching personnel anyway. If we find that we're not satisfied with that, we actually change to a different provider.
Thank you. Just sort of moving on from there, how do they have opportunities to liaise with the staff in the school, the one-to-one tuition people, so that they're, doing something not one size fits all?
I think that tuition's actually, it's going to have the most impact if there is a lot of liaison between the young people, the tutor and the school. So we do allow that facility to happen. If the school or the tutor want to talk to each other, we will pay extra money for those conversations to take place. We are also provided with reports which we can share with the schools. And we also, some of our tutors will attend the personal education plan meeting. As part of my master's, I was looking at the impact of tuition with our Year 11s, and I interviewed some of our Year 11s about what they felt the impact of it was. And I feel that those young people that were able to have more of a consultative approach with their tutor to say, I've been studying of mice of men this week, I'm struggling with, characterisation, for example, and work with them. I find that that's made a better impact of the rapport that the young person's had with their tutor, rather than trying to have certain sessions. But we do actually ask for the schools to provide the curriculum information, and we also ask for them to provide the type of, examining board, so that the tutors have an awareness of the curriculum that's covered.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Oh, Councillor Pearce. Yeah, I think you've actually moved down to I think your microphone's up there. I don't know if they...
Right, thank you. Thank you for your report. It is very complex, I must admit, and very interesting at the same time. And I agree with the chair that I'd be interested to do more training, like you say, because it is a large area to cover. And I'm also interested, you said asylum children. There's going to be a bigger increase in this side of the children coming in, I take it, in Thurrock?
So, no, that's absolutely fine. So in terms of unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, every local authority has a quota, so it's 0.1%. And for Thurrock, that is 45 children. Previously, it was 0.07, which was, I think, 32. So we're now, currently today, we're at 39 and increasing, so we're expecting to be at 45 probably within the next couple of months.
How are they all settling in? I mean, they're English, most of them know English, because we're a lazy race, really. We rely on people speaking English, but how does the language problem cover?
I mean, in terms of the unaccompanied asylum-seeking children coming into the country, some of them speak some English. Some of them do really, really well, and Keeley service, obviously, they do English as a second language. So there's lots of sort of support put in for them, and they do really well. They do really well in placement, the majority of them, and pick up English really quickly.
Additionally, we have been providing dual lingo dictionaries for our young people in their home language. They have automatic access to a program called Flash Academy, which is it's an online app where they can look at food, whatever, different topics, and they can make translations with that as well. So that's made quite a big impact. We've also provided the post-16 supported accommodations with additional resources, such as books and stationery and things like that, so that we can help them with their acquisition of English. And we've also purchased some workbooks so that they can support to do that as well, because most of them are looking at functional skills or entry level. So we've tried to provide exemplification of what they need to be able to do in order to pass those. Our main aim, though, is to get them into an educational provision as quickly as we can. And sometimes that does depend upon the time of year that they come into the country, because most colleges, for example, their enrolment is in September. But historically, we've worked very well with SEC, who have provided a roll-on, roll-off programme. We are looking at what the need will be moving forward, particularly as our numbers have increased, our quota's gone up to 45. So we are continuously evaluating the provision and looking at what we need to do next to support needs.
Can you use your microphone, please?
It's traumatised for them because they've come from long distances and travelled, well, unbelievably, across the channel and everything. So I'm very interested to know how they're all coping. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think we're going to have ample opportunity further down the agenda to discuss many items like this. With the time being what it is, has anybody got any further questions? Right, well, I think what I'll do, thank you very much for the time that you've taken to present this to us tonight. As I will reiterate, it is an extremely technical report, something we've all got to get our heads around properly, I think, me more than anyone. Right, so can I just move to the recommendations, please? Which are, the committee approves the annual report with the virtual school head teacher for the academic year 2021 to 2022, and uses this information to acknowledge, evaluate, scrutinise, if appropriate, challenge the service that are provided to all CYP and LA.
Agreed.
Have all agreed? Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Keeley. Right, and with that, I'll now move on to item number 5, which is the Children's Social Care Performance Report. And I think it's Janet Simon and Dan Jones presenting.
Okay, so I'm going to produce that. Thank you, Chair. So there's a number of reports that are being presented here tonight, so what I don't want to do is go over everything that everybody else is going to report on. So I'll just, and I'm assuming everybody's had an opportunity to read the report, so I'll try and summarise it and then allow, obviously, other people might want to ask questions. So the purpose of this report is to provide information on the performance for children looked after and care leavers, to look at the overall performance, which is good in general. And this report focuses on data up to the end of Q2 for this financial year, up to the end of September. So at the end of the Q2, there were 282 children looked after by Thurrock, and a further 257 young people who were receiving a care leaving service. So this report talks about things like the visits to children. It talks about unaccompanied asylum seekers, adoption, fostering, and a number of other issues. So most of our children who are looked after are placed with foster carers or, where possible, with family members. Thurrock Council continues to develop its Think Family approach to reduce the need for children to enter care or to help them to return to their families where it's safe to do so. We're constantly trying to recruit foster carers, and this is a priority for Thurrock. The data that's provided in this report includes data sets that we report on yearly and compares us against national averages, statistical neighbours, and the Eastern region. And that allows us to challenge ourselves in terms of the performance that we're undertaking with our children and making sure that actually we compare well. At the end of September, as I said, there were 282 children. In terms of benchmarking against statistical neighbours, we had 64 per 10,000. For England, that was 70 per 10,000, and for our statistical neighbours, that was 68. So we're kind of just under in terms of the numbers of children looked after. We've had a brief discussion about unaccompanied asylum seekers and the increase in the numbers. At the end of September, we had 30 unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. As of today, we have 39 unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. We expect that number to rise. We're receiving most of our transfers in from other authorities or via the hotels, and it's through the national transfer mechanism. All children who are in care, all cases are reviewed to make sure we've got the correct children in care, and that we're making sure that they've got the right outcomes. In terms of the numbers of children in care, when we look at the gender of our looked after population, we tend to have more male children in care. The majority of our unaccompanied asylum seeking young people are male as well. Thurrock's children who are looked after are predominantly white British, which is in line with Thurrock's school census in spring 2020 and the statistical and neighbour averages. The percentage of black or black British children in care is 14%, and it's significantly higher when compared to our statistical neighbours, a national average of 7, but is in line with the demographics of the population in Thurrock when you compare it to the neighbours and national data. So the school census in 2020 showed that 14% of the children living in Thurrock were black or black British, compared to 7% for the national average. So that's in line with what we'd expect. Most children come into care because of significant harm they're experiencing or likely to experience. Moving on to our youth offending service, a statutory intervention is undertaken when a child has been convicted by the courts or made subject to a youth caution or youth conditional caution, and consequently has YOS intervention. During Q2, there were 30 children open to the YOS service. 5 of these were looked after children, which is 1.7% of the CLA population, and 5 of those children represented 17% of the young people open to YOS, and they were all white British. In terms of young people who are detained, if young people are detained because of criminal activities, if they're on remand, then they become looked after. And 2 children were subject to youth detention accommodation orders during Q1 of 2022-23, and both were from black and minority ethnic, the black and minority ethnic community. They're both now serving custodial sentences, And at the end of the second quarter, there were no young people placed on remand. In terms of the out-of-court disposal panel, it dealt with 17 offences relating to 17 children, and none of these were looked after. We've done some data on our children looked after missing episodes. The most common reason for children going missing is that they've stayed out past their curfew with friends or with their families. In quarter two, between July and September, there were 218 missing episodes, and that accounted for 28 individual children, comparing to 181 in the same period the previous year. The majority of missing episodes relate to young people who are late home, as I said, or who are aged over 16. And I know at the last corporate parenting committee, we spoke about some of the missing episodes. We've done a little bit of a deep dive in terms of children who are missing and children who've had 3 or more episodes, the ages of children. And what we can see is that the majority of the children who are missing are aged between the ages of 15 and 18. We have very low numbers of children who are aged between 12 and 14. They're under 5, so I won't go through the numbers because we try not to talk about any numbers that are under 5 in case they identify young people. But the majority of children, so over 50%, were late home, so they weren't missing for long periods of time. Around 48% were with family, friends, boyfriend, girlfriend, so they weren't, their whereabouts weren't unknown, but they weren't authorised. And a very low number, there were concerns around criminal exploitation. So we have done a little bit of a deep dive, and that information can be provided to committee members if they so wish. In terms of our children who do go missing, one of the things we want to do is make sure we try and establish what the reasons are for children going out and being missing. Since 2020, our Inspire Youth Hub have been commissioned to undertake independent return home interviews. All of our children are offered a return home interview within 72 hours following their missing events when they return. There's a network of support around those children to try and engage them and understand the reasons. Our performance has improved significantly from a very low point, and numbers of children accepting and receiving an interview is now, the last point was 100% received, were offered an interview, and 73% accepted an interview, compared to 56% in September 2021. So we've seen some improvement in terms of our performance, and I think it's continuing to improve. In terms of visits to children, there's different visiting frequencies, which can be anything from 20 to 65 working days within the regulations. Performance in this area is particularly good. It's consistently stayed above 90%. There was a slight dip in April when it went down to 90%, and in the previous year. But what we've seen since April this year, the performance has consistently been above 90%, and at the end of September was 94% in time. As children seen and spoken to. I won't go over the children looked after in education, as Keely's provided a report. In terms of children and their mental health, we look at strengths and difficulty questionnaires for children, which provides an indication of the mental well-being of looked after children. And for each child, where their score indicates the level of need, which is a score of 13 or higher, their case is individually reviewed by a multi-agency panel. And a report regarding the mental health of children looked after will be presented at the next corporate parenting committee. We found that during COVID-19 and recently, we haven't seen increases in terms of the average scores and the mental health and the mental well-being of our looked after children. At the end of quarter two, there were 5 children adopted and 9 children matched with prospective adopters, and we've seen some more children adopted in the last, I think, month or so, which will be reported at the next meeting. Our timeliness of adoption is measured as a 12-month rolling average, which is the length of time from the child entering care to moving in with an adoptive family. And at the end of quarter two, Thurrock's average was 609 days. It's above the national average of 454 days. But these figures can be impacted by 1 or 2 children. So if a child, if we're unable to find an adopted placement within a reasonable timescale, or if an adopted placement breaks down and we have to place a child again, that can significantly impact on their performance. We've also seen delays in court proceedings, court availability, and appeals from parents, which means that there's a delay in terms of children being placed with adopters or adoption orders going through. In terms of our care leavers, at the end of September 2022, we saw a drop of care leavers from 298 to 257.
Sorry, Janet, I'm very sorry. Can I just interrupt? Could you just speak up a tiny little bit? Apparently,
sorry.
people on the screen can't hear you.
Okay. So at the end of Q2 2022, 54% of the care leavers aged 19 to 21 years old were in part or full-time education or employment, compared to 49% in the year before. So that's an improvement. And it brings us more in line with our statistical neighbour average of 57% and the England average of 55%. Although we're in line with our statistical neighbours in the England average, we also feel that that's an area that we want to focus on. And so we do actually have quite a focus on making sure that our care leavers are gainfully employed or in educational training. In terms of accommodation, 89% of our young people are reported to be in suitable accommodation, which is in line again with our statistical neighbours in England average. Unsuitable accommodation can include things like young people declining to say where they're living, or if a young person is in prison, for example, that's not deemed to be suitable accommodation. In terms of young people keeping in touch, we try to keep in touch with our young people who are aged over, our care leavers. And of course, there's some choice in this. They're young adults, and some may choose not to be involved with us. But our personal advisors work really hard to keep in touch with our care leavers, and 89% of care leavers we're in touch with, marginally below some of our statistical neighbours in the England average, but an area that we're really focusing on. And the reason for the percentage that are not in touch is mainly due to some of the longer-term missing UASC that we've had that are within our care leaving population. So that takes me to the end of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Again, very detailed. Thank you. Obviously, bearing in mind the time, I'm just going to speed a tiny little bit. I've got a question, sort of stroke comment for you. I mean, again, this is obviously written at home, and you've maybe touched on many things. The report contains many KPIs. Some are above average, some are on par, some are below. Can I ask, with these measurements and the statistics, what do you plan to do with the information? Do you have kind of learning action plans?
So we, as a service, we have monthly development board reports. So each of the strategic leads produce a development report where they look at the performance in their teams and their services, and we come up with plans and talk about so what factors, so what difference are we making, and what are we going to do about it, and what will be different. We also have a monthly performance meeting, which I chair, which includes all of the senior management team within children's social care, where we deep dive on specific areas and try and come up with solutions and think about how we're going to do things differently to make a difference.
Okay, so you're broadly sort of answering my next piece in here, because I was going to say, really we shouldn't be accepting averages, should we? We should always be striving for the best. If we treat these children as our own children, you don't want to settle, do you? You're always looking for the best. So I was just going to ask, what we'll be doing continually to improve and better the averages, but I think you're kind of touching on that now.
Yeah, and we're continually challenging ourselves, to do better, and trying to think of these children as our children and not just any child. And no, we're not satisfied to just be average. We want to be better than average. So as I've said around the care leavers, yes, we're on par with our statistical and national neighbours, but that's not good enough. We want more than 50+% of our young people to be in education, employment and training. So we're trying to do what we can to improve that.
Thank you very much. And again, I'll just take the opportunity. I know I have touched on it. I've actually visited and took part in many sessions and things with different services, and that was hugely beneficial for me. So before I move on to, are there any other questions from any other members, please? Councillor Carter.
Hi, thank you for your report, Janet. It's quite stable, and it's nice that I first come on this committee like just after COVID-19. It's nice to see the numbers a lot more stabler now after quite a shift in a few of them. I'm going to ask the same question I asked of you at Children's Overview and Scrutiny. Is when we list children's looked after, and I really want to thank you for going into the missing episodes, taking a dive into it. But could we have a breakdown between how many were missing without authorisation and how many were missing from care, if that's possible, please?
Yes, that's absolutely fine. So we've got that, so I'll make sure that I send that to Kenna to send out.
Thank you very much.
And just in terms of performance, what I would like to say is that there are some areas where we are on average, but when it comes to things like seeing children, visiting children, we do much better, significantly better than our neighbours nationally and statistically. So there are areas where we are kind of passing other people.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, that's a no. Okay. Right, so can I then please just move to the recommendations outlined in the report, and that can be found on page 12, and that's that members note improvements and areas for improvement in children's social care and note the work that is undertaken to ensure good and improving performance. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Janet. Right, if I can now move on to item number 6, which is Children in Care Council update. And I believe we have Laura Hall, Christopher Bennett is the chair to present the report.
Hello everyone. So I'm Laura Hall, and sat next to me is Jasmine Gresham. She is our newly appointed chairperson, so this is her first corporate parenting meeting. So she doesn't wish to speak today, but she's come along to experience what the corporate parenting meeting is like, and hopefully by the time our next report comes round, she'll feel confident enough to share it with you all. The report that we submitted was back for the September meeting. So it is we've got some updates from them. So what I'll do is I'll just give a brief update of our last report, and then I'll give you an update of where we are at the moment. So for those of you who don't know, I think most of you do, the Children in Care Council, group of young people in care or care leavers who meet once a month to discuss different things going on in care, whether that be updates from the council or whether that just be general in care experiences with each other. We have had different focus groups and we've had different visitors, and people can book and come along and have a half an hour sort of to speak to us or to deliver any information or ask us questions. We do quite a lot of questionnaires that get sent to us online from different services for sort of young people in care's opinion. Our members are 11 plus, mostly due to the nature of our discussions. We deemed 11 as an appropriate age. We do have some, like I say, care leavers as well, and they can come up to the age of 25 when they then leave the service. However, we do have a couple that are over 25 who we have asked back to just give us updates on their lives, really, just so that the younger members can see the future, what it might look like for them. Obviously, during COVID, all of the meetings were done online, and we lost our old project manager. But since we've taken it over, since May last year, we have gone back to face-to-face meetings over at the Beehive. Since then, we've had sort of a turnover in members, and we now have an active group of 10 members, which is more than where we were last year. This includes both online and in person, so we do sort of hybrid meetings. And on average, that sort of is mostly 1 or 2 online and the rest are in person, which we've found really a lot more beneficial, and we've been getting a lot more information from young people because of that. Since our meeting started back up face-to-face, we've done COVID focus groups, we've done focus groups around domestic violence, around healthy relationships. We've worked alongside Kylie Banks and attended quite a lot of the activities put on by Young Voices and things like that. We have worked on promoting a new leaflet and a new booking system and a new referral form. So that has gone out to all social workers and it will go back out again. And social workers or any workers can refer people directly to myself for me to contact them to see if they're interested in the CICC. They don't have to just look it up online or however their information can come to me and I can give them a call directly. I'm also a foster carer myself, so I liaise directly with foster carers, whether that be through the foster carers groups or through the support groups. So there's quite a lot of links that way. We've got all of our meetings for the next year from January to December booked. So our hope is that we meet on the end of this month and then we will send out all of our dates and all of our each month our meeting sort of our brief agenda of what we're looking to discuss and invite in members of the council or different members from Thurrock Council, whether that be Dan and some different members, Sandra, some different people to come in. But also if people want to come in, like I say, we have a booking form system. So by having our meetings booked for the whole year, we hope to give many people an opportunity to come along to one of our meetings. And I think from our future plans, like so from what you guys might want to know, like I say, we keep hoping to develop over the next 12 months. We've been working with a lot more young people through Open Doors Advocacy Service in promoting the service and sending out our flyer to people regularly in the hope that they would like to join. So that's it from me. Any questions?
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. I will actually say, I mean, myself and Councillor Roper, we attended the meet and greet back in December, didn't we? And it was very interesting, actually. It's a good taste to actually see what you guys get up to. And I think at that time I did with Dan, I actually requested all the meeting dates. So that's great. That's coming through now. And that would be good if that could be circulated to all the members of the committee, because I think we should... I mean, I certainly will try and attend, you know, obviously if I'm invited. I'd like to attend to actually see what goes on sort of first hand. I did actually read on point the 3.8 that, you know, you've got this buddy system working as well for new members, which is excellent, really. I mean, even, well, we all need a buddy just to hold our hand for a short while, so I think that's great because that'll only encourage new members to sort of get their voices heard. I think you mentioned as well, you've got 10 members now attending.
Yeah,
But that's great.
10
I think that's
active
an
members.
increase since January.
Since last time. Since December.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, so there was 2 that didn't want to start till January because we had our Christmas meet-up and we had the meet and greet and they didn't want to come to either of those straight away. So we've already got 2 that are booked to come on our first meeting and are participating in our group chat, which I think sometimes helps because they almost feel like they get to know people before they even come to the meeting. And for young people nowadays, we know that social media and those sorts of online interactions can really help them feel more confident in a social situation because they'll feel like they've already spoken to people and know who they are.
Okay, yeah, I mean, that's great. I mean, hopefully that's a real good sort of sign for the future, really, isn't it? Getting people, the young people more engaged. I know there's a sort of new impetus behind the council itself to actually get things moving, and I really look forward to see what comes out of that, really. Just one other, it's just going slightly off piece here. I've actually just made a little note, and it's something that does actually come up from time to time, you know, within the recommendations, and this is probably for wider discussion. It says to note, and I kind of I always feel that we really need to be noting and comment on these agendas, and I probably will take this up afterwards, really. I think, you know, on many of these agenda items, I think we do need to be writing that it's actually for comment as well. And again, just coming back to the executive summary, it doesn't really sort of work that well for me, really. It's not really telling us too much about sort of key facts, good and bad. So, you know, so we can all become better corporate parents. Yeah, so again, I mean, that's something I might pick up afterwards, just sort of moving forward for future meetings and future reports. So, any other questions, please? Please do.
Hello, my name's Tina Russell. I'm Assistant Director for SETCAMS, and I just wondered about whether you felt that the young people have an opportunity to express their views on mental health resources, and whether you'd be open to a participation lead from our service coming and working alongside you to get the views and work collaboratively.
So in some ways, funny you should say that. I think out of our 10 active members, 3 are currently working with CAMS and others have done in the past. Our group, as the counsellors who met with our meet and group at the meet and greet, will tell you they're very open about their mental health and their support that they've gained and their own issues. I think that's a lot to do with, would you say, the bond that we've sort of got as a group? They're very open with each other, so I think that would be great. We'd be really interested in that. We are also open to separate meetings as well, or separate sessions. So although we have our meetings once a month, our council meetings, we're always open to putting on or coming along or organising other meetups with different services.
That's really helpful, because we have participation groups within our own service, but I think it's important to hear the views of young people that aren't in our service but would perhaps come if we organise things differently, or
Yep.
you know, and so hearing those views and getting some collaboration around service design would be really helpful. So I'll get in touch with you.
Yeah, perfect.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? No? Okay, thank you very much. Right, well, if we can then move to the recommendation. It's that the committee note the work carried out by the Children in Care Council, the purpose and the role of the Children in Care Council, and to establish what corporate parents need to do to help the Children in Care Council achieve their aims and objectives. Can I have a vote on that, please? Okay, all good. Thank you very much. Thank you very much indeed. And if I can now move on to that's item number 7, which is, excuse me, which is the Independent Reviewing Officer Annual Report, please. And I think that may be, is that Ruth? Oh, it's okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. My name is Trevor Willis. I'm the Service Manager for the Independent Reviewing Service. And I'll just give a very brief overview of the salient points in the report. Just as way of background, the role of the Independent Reviewing Officer, or as we call them, the IRO, it's a legal requirement, and their role is to ensure that the care plan identified by the social work teams meets the current needs of the child, and they're consistent with the wider legal responsibilities of the council, namely as corporate parents for the child. The IRO also has a responsibility to monitor the child's case on an ongoing basis, and to that aim, the IRO is independent from the day-to-day case management of the young person and the social work teams. The IRO service remains stable. That it consists of 5 members of staff. There have been no staff changes. All staff members are substantive in their role, which provides great stability for children and young people. And the IRO is often the only consistent adult in their lives due to changes in social work or changes in placements as well. Whilst the numbers of children looked after remain stable, there has been an increase in the number of reviews, which reflects the complexity of the children and young person's experiences and the experiences they face. And this obviously has an impact on the number of reviews that the IRO service undertake, but also in terms of the work undertaken by children's services as a whole. Despite this increase in reviews, 100% of reviews are done on time and 99.1% of reports are provided within timescales. The children looked after cohort in terms of numbers remains in line with statistical neighbours, and Janet's already touched on the numbers of children from Black or Black British backgrounds, that whilst it's slightly higher than statistical neighbours, it is in line with the 2020 school census. There has been an increase in the number of children experiencing a change in placement, but consideration needs to be given to the pressures nationally when it comes to placements available to children and young people, as well as children presenting with more and more complex needs as well, which means that specialist placements need to be found for them. Every time a child has or a young person has a change of placement, obviously the independent reviewing officer will go and visit that young person, and they will hold a review within a short time frame as well, which would account for the slight increase in the number of reviews. The IRO service continues to be children and young person focused. We continue to look at innovative ways to engage with and provide minutes to children and young people that are meaningful and relevant. We're looking at embedding a magazine style of minutes that are used more widely. We're also looking at writing letters and also making sure that minutes are written to children and young people, sometimes in the first person as well. So again, it kind of addresses them directly. Children and young people, due to the length of time that a lot of the independent reviewing officers have been in post, they've built up really positive long-term relationships with children and young people. And those children and young people routinely contact their IRO, both to discuss concerns, but also to celebrate achievements, which demonstrates the impact of the IRO service and how children and young people benefit from being held in mind, and also from positive long-term relationships. I think is that anything else, unless there are any questions? It's very, again, brief.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, just one sort of thing sort of jumped out at me. Again, this is another sort of topic I wasn't too familiar with. There's 5 IROs within the service, and I mean, they are actually Thurrock Council employees, aren't they?
They are Thurrock Council employees insofar as they're employed by Thurrock Council, but they don't have direct case responsibility for any of the cases that they review. So therefore, they're not involved in the day-to-day management decision-making. So therefore, that's how they maintain their independent status.
Okay, because I mean, I was just wondering. I mean, it's just something that sort of I thought about. You know, people develop friendships and alliances, don't they? And I was just wondering how, you know, you know, the giving the separation so they can work independently. Would it not be best that maybe the IROs work for maybe neighbouring boroughs, you know, and that is reciprocated back the other way, and that actually gives 100% sort of independence, doesn't it? And I was just wondering if IROs can actually sort of be, they can, like I say, build up a friendship or an alliance, and maybe they aren't totally independent. Do you kind of see what I mean? I don't wish to say too much.
I understand what you're saying,
yeah.
but I think the IRO handbook is very clear about the roles and the remit of the IRO, so that there's clear legal structure in terms of what IROs can and can't do. Insofar as other IROs from other local authorities chairing cases, I think we're really clear in children's services and in the QA service, which the IRO comes under, that we know our children better. We know our children best. We've got much higher expectations for the children of Thurrock than, and having worked in other local authorities, than any other local authority I've worked in. I wouldn't particularly be happy about somebody else coming in and looking after my children. I'd much rather make sure that I look after my own children and make sure I get good outcomes for them. I don't know if that's... Yeah.
Yes, did it.
So as Trevor has said, there's a clear structure in terms of how IROs are managed, and there's a handbook. IROs also have access to, if they don't agree with something, you know, they can raise a dispute. They can raise a dispute with us, and they do challenge the work that we do. You know, it's not always an easy relationship, if I'm honest, but they also have the option to kind of seek independent legal advice if they need to. There's a route by which they can escalate things if they're not happy through the director. They can then, you know, they can raise it in different places if they're not happy, and they will, and they do.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I guess I might be sort of opening up a tiny little can of worms there, but I just thought it worth bringing up because it's sort of kind of sitting at home. It seems kind of a fairly obvious question. Just one other little thing. 2.4 on page 43. It says basically it says 53%, and they don't know about their care plan. I mean, what do we actually do to make them try to make them understand that?
Yeah. So this was feedback directly from children and young people, and I think actually in discussion and looking more deeply at this, it was more about the language that was used, because if you look at the following phrases within that, 60% felt involved in making the plan and 76% of children thought the plan would make a difference. So I think that's more about the questions that we've asked. So in order to try and address that, we've now included better ways of getting feedback from children and young people, including QR codes on the end of every set of minutes that we send out, making sure that the language that we use is a lot clearer as well.
Any members have any questions? That's a no. Okay, thank you very much. Nice and short and sweet, as I say. So that can I then move to the recommendation again, please? That is for the Corporate Parenting Committee to review and comment on the IRO Annual Report 2021-2022 and the recommendations within the report. All agreed? Thank you very much. Thank you. And that brings us nicely now round to item number 8, which is the joint report on initial health assessments for looked after children. And I believe that might be, is it Dan Jones and Helen
That's
Palmer?
me. Yeah.
Thank you, Dan.
Good evening, thank you. So this is a further report on the initial health assessments for looked after children, which is an improvement area for both Thurrock Council and the Health Board.
Dan, could I just ask you to speak up a tiny
Sorry,
bit,
which
please?
is an
Thank
improvement
you.
area
Thank
for
you.
both Thurrock and the Health Board. As set out in the executive summary, we have been working to try and improve this, and the ICB has commissioned additional capacity via an alternative provider, which should this month provide us with an additional 100 IHA appointments across the south of the county. We have an updated tracking system, and we're working to provide some electronic solutions so that referrals for IHAs are quicker and we are clearer when there's delays and delay reasons why. And then Janet is also chairing our regular weekly meeting, and we're getting senior managers from health attending those meetings as well, which is helping drive through any blocks we're experiencing. If I could draw members' attention to 2.3, of the report, that sets out our data based on the number of children coming into care this year to try and make sure that we're capturing children's current experience. As you can see, we continue to try and make referrals within time, and where we're over time, that's by a relatively short period. The number of IHAs that have been completed in time remains lower than we would like. However, there's a clear commitment from Health and Social Care to try and improve this as we go forward, and the issues and options analysis sets out some of this. As we go on, I think one of the things to be clear is that we continue to pursue IHA appointments for all children until they either have them or completely refuse if they're older or they leave care. The Section 3 sets out some of the issues and highlights some of the pressures that health are facing, but also sets out some of the plans to recover, which particularly includes the additional appointments coming on stream this month.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, just a couple of little questions. Yeah, within the executive summary, you know, I've highlighted it here in front of me. There's three sort of bullet points, and it's to improve the delivery of IHAs, and the following actions are to be taken. Can I ask, why hasn't all this been done before?
So, did you want to come in? No. So so there's been tracking in place for some time, and that has produced some improvements at some points in time, but it's not been consistent enough. And so we're reviewing the tracking. The electronic system is something that's Essex-wide. It was started before COVID as a project, and due to the impact of COVID, it's slowed down, but it's back. And that system will cover not only Thurrock, but Essex and Southend, so there'll be a really clear, consistent electronic referral, rather than relying on manual paperwork going through, which should speed up the referral process and help in the planning of appointments. Our tracking is fairly close, and one of the things we've been asked to contribute as part of that project is our tracking system, because it is very, very detailed, and we track it at every point until the IHA is completed and the paperwork's received back by the local authority. So some of this has been tried, but it needs a bit more development. I think this is the first time that we've been able to say that there will be additional appointments available. So that is new.
Thank you very much for that. Yeah, and then just on page 70, it's 2.3. I mean, I'm sorry, I found this section incredibly confusing. I found it sort of very difficult to understand. You know, sometimes I read reports, you know, again, in my kind of sort of early understanding of these things. You know, the reports are incredibly difficult to understand. You know, and I think we need to remember sometimes that I think they are for really general public consumption, and I think they are incredibly hard to get your head around some of these things. You know, and I kind of looked. There are some issues. It says issues driving the current delay are. Now, I mean, I think that could be really sort of quite easily summed up with a pie chart, really. You know, what is it actually saying that the main cause of the delay is? Is it, surely they're not all the same equal. Surely there is one there that is more applicable as a greater delay. Do you sort of see what I mean? Like, you can't actually read that as actually fully understanding what the actual problems are and what the delays are.
Okay, apologies, that's not clear. So, yeah, the largest issue is a lack of a paediatric appointment within the time frame that we have to deliver the IHA. I mean, they're pretty much in order in those bullet points. So the next biggest issue, we missed first appointments. For some children, they, you know, older children who may have come into care, they may refuse to attend their IHA or decide to miss their first appointment because they would prefer to do something else than what we would prefer them to do, which is to go. And sometimes it's around carers' availability. So we always try to get a child to an IHA, even if their foster carer isn't particularly available. But placements can happen in emergencies at very short notice, and carers might have things like planned holidays. And for those children to be able to go on that holiday is really, really important. They miss sometimes that first appointment. We try very hard to avoid that wherever possible. But yes, in future reports, I can try and make that clearer, so apologies, Chair.
Yeah, I mean, it's just really, I mean, I might have said it before, but I know I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but like I said, they are very difficult to understand. And I think there's a great deal of work can be done to actually simplify these, you know, some of these reports. It makes them far easier to understand, far quicker, rather than someone like myself maybe picking it up, reading it, trying to get my head around it, can't get my head around it, put it down, go and have a cup of tea, come back. That they're not easy to understand sometimes. So I'm sorry to pick on you on this one, but I find it's a common thread that runs through many reports, and I really think we need to address this, really. Any questions from other members, please? Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report, Dan. I think it's worth bringing up again. I brought it up in the minutes that it's quite disappointing that NELF aren't here to provide an update as to where that extra money they were given has gone. But obviously I understand that they've contributed to this report. Sorry, I wasn't speaking into my mic there. This has been an area of ongoing concern, and I do think we need to acknowledge the department and people like Janet who have worked really hard on getting these numbers back or improving them, and it is external partners that are failing us, and that's why I'm very disappointed that an external partner was invited and has not come.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much for that, Dan. Thank you. I think we'll move to the recommendation again, which is members are aware of the continuing performance issues with the initial health assessments and the action being taken by the Children's Services and the NHS to improve this. All in agreement? Thank you. Thank you very much, Dan. If we can then move to item number 9, which is the Children Looked After Health Report, please. And I think that's, are we online with this one, are we?
Sorry, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think this is Yvonne's online for this one.
Hello.
Okay, so it's Yvonne. Are you there ready to present this report for us?
Hello, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Oh, brilliant. Wonderful. I do apologize. I may have to keep my camera off because when I turn it on, it tells me I've got very poor network notification. So if you don't mind, I'll keep my camera off. My name is Ivana Nafi. I'm a Deputy Director for Safegarden for Mid and South Essex Integrated Care Board. This organization has replaced the previous CCG, for those of you who may not be aware of this. I'm presenting this report on behalf of my colleague, Nikki, who's just left the organization yesterday. So please do bear with me. The ICB as an organization works very closely with NELT, and we commission the IHA services through NELT. I have heard that Dan is presented a report between himself and Helen Farmer, who's one of our directors who commissions children and young people services. So for this particular report, this is the first report since 2019. There wasn't any in 2020 or 21 due to the COVID pandemic. The report starts from page 81 to 123. So, and I will take it as read, but I'll just give you a brief summary. And if anyone has got any questions, if you could ask your questions and please state the page that you are referring to so that I can respond to your question effectively. So basically, this report covers a period of 2021 to 2022, and it does describe the challenges and achievements that has been made between these 2 years. Some of the achievements have been very good working relationships with our partners, i.e. close working relationship with the local authority, contract team and the commissioners for looked after children within the health services and the local authority. There has been some challenges with regards to completion of IHAs, as Dan has stated in his report. But there has also been positive ways of working with regards to how we can improve the IHA assessments from the health perspective. I would just like us to note that IHAs is a joint partnership responsibility. And through partnership working, we can improve the IHAs. Some of the points that may not have been shared here is also regards to some of the capacity issues and workforce issues that is being experienced by all agencies, including health and health medical practitioners as well, particularly pediatricians. There has been some also concerns around some of the factors, i.e. some young people or foster carers declining appointments due to various reasons. There has been some concerns about interpreting services, as we have to use the appropriate interpreting services. So there's been other factors that has contributed to the delays in IHAs being completed in the statutory timeframe. However, as an ICB, we are really working very closely to resolve this matter. And I have been informed that the ICB has actually put in some funding to ensure that the extra backlog of IHAs are being looked at and covered by another provider to support NELFT. I also know that there has been some project that started just before COVID, but unfortunately due to COVID, this was put on hold. And that is the digital solution tracking that would be covered across the system, i.e. SET, Southend, Essex and Thurrock, to track IHAs across the system and to monitor this data. So hopefully that would improve the situation, and also hopefully maybe March or June we could come back here and assure you of the progress of that. There has been some recommendations made in this report, and some of the recommendations that have been made are that we could put IHA on the agenda for this board, and also as an ICB, we have decided to put this on our agenda on a monthly basis. There is also weekly meetings. There's been monthly meetings between the ICB and NELFT to look at LAC as a whole, and also discuss some of the challenges that NELFT as an organization is facing with the LAC cohort. Some of the actions that has been taken also includes the ICB commissioning additional capacity, and we are looking at pediatricians. Unfortunately for us, the IHA needs to be completed by a medical officer. And because there's a shortage of pediatricians, this is being proven very difficult. So what we have decided to do is to have discussion with the royal colleges, and also maybe to change the statutory requirement for medical officers, and maybe propose that qualified nurses can also look at IHS to clear the backlog. So these are some of the pieces of work that is being done by the ICB to support the looked after children service. We've also looked at the dental health for looked after children, and this is a national problem. So we have shared the link or the map that actually tells social workers and nurses some of the dental practices that are happy to register looked after children, or separated migrant children, or unaccompanied asylum seeking children. So this has been shared across the system so that colleagues would have easily recognized some of the dental practices that are happy to look at, to assess looked after children. We've also looked at the quality and performance to improve the status. We are reviewing, I say we as a ICB, reviewing our contracts to look at the IHE performance. We have completed an option paper to look at different models of IHA, which I've already mentioned. We've also decided that the looked after children nurses will be invited to some complex placement planning meetings, so that there is that development and there is that general oversight of IHA and looked after children. And we have also programmed an audit of IHS and review health assessments. So all this is going on within the ICB and our partner providers, including the local authority. I also understand that there is a LAC steering group meeting that meets on a weekly basis, which we will be attending, and also working together with our partners to ensure that across the system, this is not just being looked at within health, but it's looked at across the local authority and health, working together. For governance arrangements on page 99, we are continuing with the 6 weekly health meetings with NELFT. There's a weekly tracking meeting. There is the designated nurses strategic leads meeting, which is bi-monthly, to look at progress across the health system, looking at looked after children, specifically just for looked after children. The ICB has also provided training for social workers, for GPs on looked after children as a whole. And we are providing advice and supervision for looked after named professionals across the health economy, just to raise some of the awareness. I think what is very key or important is not to leave some of these discussions at a strategic level. It is very key that operational frontline staff are actually aware of some of the strategic concerns, and they are shared across from floor to the top level. So there's a transparent understanding of what the needs are. Because I find that when we have these discussions and it's not disseminated to the front line, there is that disparity, and some of the concerns are not distributed across the line. So that is also something that we are really encouraging and promoting that we do. I am going to stop here and ask if anyone's got any questions that I may not have covered in our report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. Yeah, I've got a couple of points, sort of stroke questions for you, really. You know, it's taken, I'm really going back to, it's page 83, and it says the Health Pledge commits us to helping our children and young people to be physically and emotionally healthy. This can only be fully achieved when we are working in partnership and hear the voices of children and young people. Now, it's taken this committee and the Health and Wellbeing Board, I believe, you know, to really shake this problem up. So why, can you just explain to me exactly why so little focus has been given to this until this year? And I'd also like to draw your attention to the paragraph on page 85, which outlines the ICB's commitment to local authorities. And I'm really, I've underlined it here. Under the Children's Act, we have a duty to comply and cooperate with requests with the local authority and the system in providing support and services. So, can you explain to me why so little has actually been done until recent times on this? Because I know it's quite a serious topic, isn't it?
Chair, can I just ask you to repeat your question, please? You keep cutting in and out.
I'm very sorry, that must be me. Yeah, it's taken
Sorry.
the committee, this committee and the Health and Wellbeing Board quite a bit of time to shake this problem up. So why, can you just explain to the committee why there's been so little focus given until this year, you know, on initial health assessments? Can I just ask that, please? I'm sorry, did you hear that? I mean, I can move on to another question if you're unable to answer.
Sorry, Chair, could you tell me the page number that you're referring to? Because I can't really hear your question.
Yeah, there's page 83, really. It's just a clarification, really. I just wanted to try and explain to the committee why it's taken so long to actually get this kind of shaken up, and then delivery on the initial health assessments, to get us into a better place. I was just wondering if you'd explain to us what the problems have been in the past. I think I'll move on to another question.
Do you want to try mine one?
Can you hear me, Yvonne?
I can hear you, but not full sentences.
I'll move on to another question, that's fine. Yeah, and it's actually, right, so now you've, yeah, on page 87, can you hear me, Yvonne, page 87?
Yes, did you say page 87, please?
Yeah, page 87. Yeah, it says extra funding was provided to address the backlog of initial health assessments. Can you tell me, I mean, what did that actually money get spent on?
Are you talking about the extra funding?
Yes.
Okay, so if I got your question right, so the ICB, NELFT reported that there was a backlog of IHAs, and the commissioner, unfortunately, Helen Farmer is not here, but Helen Farmer led on this conversation with NELFT, but I understand that NELFT expressed that they needed some sort of funding to clear the backlog. So the ICB funded an amount of money for NELFT to clear the initial health assessment, the backlog of it. One thing that came out of that conversation, from my understanding, was that it became very clear that, and this was a guidance from NHS England, that we couldn't prioritize Thurrock children. And so for the IHS that were, so for out of young people that were placed in Thurrock from out of area, they had to be seen in addition to Thurrock children. So this actually also contributed to some of the delays for the Thurrock children having their IHAs. I cannot confirm what the money was used for, but I understand that the money and funding that was provided was not used fully. I understand that a report has been requested from NELF to have a breakdown of what that funding was used for and if it wasn't used, to have an explanation as to why. I'm sorry, Helen is not here to give you that full explanation as to what the funding was used for or why it wasn't used.
Okay, thank you very much. I mean, the communication is quite difficult tonight, I think. I know really, I mean, this is why it's so helpful if actually people doing the presentations can actually come to committee and be in front of us. It does make life quite a bit easier sometimes. But if I can just pass over to Councillor Carter now, please.
Thank you, Chair. I agree this might have been a communication problem with my question, but to me that sounded like NELF took the additional funding and from Thurrock and then said it couldn't be used to prioritise Thurrock. I just want to confirm that.
I'm just going to paraphrase the question you've just asked, Chancellor Carter, if I got it right. Are you asking if NELF took the funding specifically for Thurrock young people, however, did not use the money for Thurrock young people? Is that what you're asking?
Yes, essentially, yes. They took the additional funding and then said they couldn't prioritise Thurrock. I was just clarifying something you said. Thank you.
That instructions came from NHS England and some of the royal colleges and some national bodies that clearly stated that if a child is looked after, for instance, in Thurrock, it doesn't matter where they've come from. If they are due on the IHAs to be seen, they should not be removed and replaced by Thurrock children just because they are a Thurrock child. And so therefore, with regards to the IHA, I'm going to call it IHA list. If a Thurrock child was number 10 and there was someone from Havering or any of the London boroughs, they will be seen before the Thurrock child. The Thurrock child could not be prioritized. So I think that may have also contributed to some of the backlog of Thurrock children being on the list. As to why the money wasn't used specifically for Thurrock children, I am not sure I will be able to respond to that because Nelft and Helen Farmer are not here.
Can I continue? So I think we're actually hearing that again. We discussed this either at the last corporate parenting or health and wellbeing, which I substituted for. I think you're referring to outer borough placements, and I think Dan might be able to put some light on this, of if a child is placed out a borough, they can't get priority. I think that's where the communication error has come. Dan?
Yeah, I'm happy to clarify. Hopefully everyone can hear me. So nationally, the advice from NHS England is where a child is placed in any area of the country, then they shouldn't be treated unfairly because they happen to be placed in one county or one local authority area. So if a Thurrock child is placed in Redbridge, they should be seen within the expected timescale, and Redbridge children can't be prioritised over that child, that Thurrock child. Equally, the same is true when we have out-of-county children placed in our area. We can't then say to the health board, well, you must look at our children first, because the direction from NHS England is that children across the country should be treated fairly, which is, I think, what everyone's trying to explain. So the additional funding that's been resourced, and there's additional, in my report I referred to an additional 100 appointments, they will be for the Thurrock area, but may not all be for Thurrock children, because it will depend on the order they've come in. But what it does represent is additional resource to help address the problem, which is welcome.
Thank you. That is what I was thinking, because we were having communication difficulties. It wasn't too easy to get, but thank you for the clarification. I would be willing to, I want to know, Chair, if we get this breakdown, from Nelft, and it hasn't helped at all. Will they be returning Thurrock's taxpayers' money?
Very interesting point. Thank you. Any other questions? Janet. I think you indicated first. Councillor Raper.
Thank you. On page 105, you talk about the children placed at a distance. We've got a third of our children being placed more than 20 miles away. I think at a previous meeting we spoke about the need for some sort of breakdown of that figure, because it could be 21 miles away, it could be 300 miles away. I don't know, can you expand on that at the moment?
I wouldn't be able to provide those details right this minute, but we do have that data, so I can get that for you.
Yeah, I think it was raised at a previous meeting. Am I right, Councillor Carter?
So within the performance report, there is there is some data around children's placement and children placed within so many miles.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily break it down as in this one is 23.2. What we say is that these ones are within 20 miles and these many are outside of 20 miles, but we could probably break it down a little bit further, and some of that information is in the
because
performance report.
the number has gone up considerably. It's now 33%, so virtually a third of the children. I think it would be interesting to see, and perhaps a little bit of information around why they've had to be on there. I know in here, not this one, but in one of the others, you explain about the choice of placement, but I just would like it clarified slightly. Thank you.
Okay, if we could leave that with you then, Janet. I've got other questions, but I think what I'll do, I'll leave them for now. Has anyone got any other questions they'd like to? Janet.
It's not really a question as such. It was about the funding that Nelft received. I just wanted to clarify that it didn't come from Thurrock Council, but came from, I think, the ICB, which is health.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, again, fairly complex issues here. I think historically going back quite a way. Councillor Carter.
Sorry, this is just a quick observation on the report. Page 106, an overview of health needs of Thurrock LAC. It's got ASD, which I assume is autism spectrum disorder. I just wanted to point out that, again, this is a public document, and many people in the public might not know what ASD was. And there's a couple of other examples of that in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, with that then, if I could then move to the recommendation, please. And that can be found on page 77. And the recommendation is that that the children looked after health report been noted. Right. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I think we've already had item 10 earlier on, so I think we'll skip through now to item 11, which is the response to urgent actions 1 and 2 of National Review, children with disabilities and complex health needs placed in residential settings. And I think that's been presented by Dan again. Thank you.
That's me, thank you. So the report is in response to a national review that's being undertaken for children with disabilities in residential settings. As people may be aware, children enter care for a range of reasons. Sometimes it's about safeguarding that child, and sometimes it's about their particularly complex needs and impact of disabilities. For a small group of children, they require very specialist placements that provide 24-hour curriculum and 24-hour care at the same time. And last year, it came to light that at 2 particular institutions, Wilsick and Fullerton Hall schools, there were significant safeguarding concerns raised, which triggered the government to call a national review. They wrote to every single local authority asking us to undertake urgent actions, and there were 2 actions we were required to undertake. One was quality and safety reviews on all the children placed in those settings, and to look at any schools in our area. So the report sets out Thurrock's response along with the attached report that was shared with the Department of Education. One of the things I wanted to reassure committee members of is that we went a little bit further than requested and looked at all the children in residential care settings who had an education healthcare plan, just to reassure ourselves. We didn't find any serious or urgent safeguarding concerns, but there were some development areas which are listed in the attachment where we felt things could be improved in terms of the oversight and making sure that things like medication were dispensed on time. The feedback from children and parents who use those services was generally positive. They felt that the educational provision and the residential provision had helped them and helped their children.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, again, just reading through this, just made a couple of little notes. At page 180, 2.1, who and where are Thurrock's Commission providers? Can you just let me know that?
Yeah, so Thurrock purchases these provisions. We have a commissioning team that does that both. It comes in two parts, so it looks at the SEN needs, the educational needs, and then the social care team as well. We don't have our own provision within Thurrock, so we're reliant on external providers, and there isn't a residential specialist school within our area, although we have special schools within our area. They don't have that residential provision attached to them. So we have to purchase those placements, and I think sort of picking up on the point from Councillor Raper earlier, they're often at a distance because there nationally are only a few centres that provide this type of very specialist education.
I mean, and can you confirm that none of Thurrock's children were actually placed in either of these two schools?
I'm not able to confirm that.
Oh, when would you be able to confirm that?
That'd be information that we couldn't provide at this meeting because of any numbers would be so small that it would possibly identify children. So we wouldn't want to identify that here.
Right. Okay. Understood. Yeah. Were the Hesley Group schools on our approved specialist schools list? And if they were, they've been removed.
They were, and they have.
Thank you. Yeah, just one other thing as well. When it's the last paragraph of the executive summary, says and really I'm just wondering, if each looked after child has an allocated social worker, a care plan and an IRO, and we only have 3 in such settings, why have we identified some areas for improved oversight? And I think that's just... I think I've highlighted here, the quality and safety reviews identified some areas for improved oversight in residential school placements. Can you just explain that for me?
Sure. I think one of the things that we learned in this process, and I think one of the things that's coming out nationally as I attend some of the national meetings on this, is that local authorities tend to see the placement through the experience of the child they have placed. So if I have a child in a residential school and on the care plan, the IRO visits, the regulated visitor reports, all of the things that relate to my child say that everything is fine, then local authorities tend to believe that the setting is doing well if the Ofsted reports reflect that. And that's very much the case at these schools. What we don't necessarily hear about is issues that relate to other children. So if there's 10 children in the school and 1 is our child and another child has an issue with a staff member, we might not know about that because it wouldn't necessarily relate to our child. There might be confidentiality issues. But Trevor's service were very helpful in contacting the LADOs in other areas, so the people who deal with allegations against staff members in these settings. And we were able to get a wider picture of actually, yes, there had been other incidents in that unit, but they didn't, under the usual reporting procedures, wouldn't have come to us. So that's one of the pieces of learning. I think one of the other things that we picked up was around the dispensation of medication, that we felt that the oversight could be better. Social workers know social work very well, but they're not necessarily experts in pharmacology. And one of the things that we've done with our health colleagues is look at the lead pharmacists for each area, starting to review children who have prescription medication in those placements. So in 2023, that'll be something we're taking forward in terms of how can we make sure that we're getting those wider picture bits that maybe when you're just looking through the lens of the social work lens of the child's experience is not always picked up.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, and then just got a couple of other sort of quick questions. And again, this is really, if I'm asking questions that are kind of, you know, maybe obvious or, you know, on page 189, there's some bullet points there, and it's got no new concerns about the conduct of a member of the workforce were identified. And this is no new concerns. Have there been concerns?
In some instances where we looked in, there had been some concerns. I mean, to take Hesley, the Hesley Group as an example, there had been concerns raised previously. They had been looked into through the appropriate process and found not substantiated initially, and then later when they came back and did some further investigation, they found more things. So what I would say is that it's not unusual in these settings for an allegation to be made against a staff member or for a concern to be raised and for it to be looked into and resolved. Where we did our quality and safety reviews, we did find that there had been issues raised, but they had been appropriately notified. They had been appropriately followed up by the provider, ourselves, and the local authority where the child's placed.
Right, okay, and then just a couple of other quick things. The quality, the review outcomes, the quality and safety reviews largely identified good care that meets needs. Largely?
Nothing's perfect, I would say. So yes, what we found was that the care was almost always of a good standard within the quality and safety reviews. As the report sets out, there were some things that could have been better. And I felt, I suppose, when I was writing, if I said everything's completely fine, that might have been a bit misleading. So that largely is reflecting the vast majority of the experience.
Okay, thank you very much. And then lastly, it's got, I think it's the fourth point down. It says, no concerns were identified and notified by the host authority, LADOs, regarding the settings in their areas where Thurrock children are in a placement. Sorry, I mean, again, this is perhaps my sort of newness to this. Has Thurrock not done its own inspections? You know, and why don't we?
So when we commission a placement, we have a commissioning monitoring visit that goes on, and they check that the contractual requirements and expectations are being met. We also have visits by the independent reviewing officer, and we have social work visits. There are visits by education colleagues in these settings for the education healthcare plan. So there's a range of people looking at different things, but the inspectorate responsible is Ofsted, and they were looking at these homes and making sure that they met standard or not. I think the reason that Hesley and the group has come to attention is because prior to the whistleblowing concerns there, everything looked quite good based on the monitoring systems that are in place nationally. So there had been referrals to the local authority designated officer, that's the person who deals with allegations. They had been looked at by the local authorities involved, but hadn't always resulted in the concerns coming out. And I think one of the issues with Hesley was that there was a level of collusion going on, so that you can see it in the national press, so that there wasn't necessarily transparency. People were seeking to hide the things they were doing in those homes.
Yes, I mean, that's obviously where my mind goes, really, isn't it? Because you're looking for sort of 100% sign of assurance, really, that these things are done properly. And if it's not done by Thurrock employees as such, that sort of leaves me with a little bit of a concern, really. I can't really sort of say too much more on that, but I just don't think it's really 100% satisfactory.
I don't think Thurrock could cover everything in these institutes. In terms of their regulation and in terms of their what they're required to do and how they're inspected, it's not just Thurrock there. So the host local authority, the local authority where the school is, has responsibilities. The inspectorate, Ofsted, has responsibilities to check not only the quality of the school, as it would at any school in our community, but also the quality of the care provision there. There are, it's referred to as Reg 44 visitors who also have responsibilities to report back and alert concerns. So I think Thurrock has been doing everything it can. I think the learning from the quality and safety reviews is there's some things we can improve on and do better, and I think we'd always find that when we review things. But I don't think the fact that things are being done by other agencies is necessarily a bad thing. It's an objective perspective. It's what should be doing, because Thurrock couldn't possibly police all of these institutions.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions? None. Okay, thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for that, Dan. It actually was quite interesting reading through that, actually. But now can I just turn then to the recommendation on that report, please, which is agenda item 11, that's on page 179, and that's that members of the Corporate Parenting Committee are informed as to the outcomes of urgent actions 1 and 2. Members of the Corporate Parenting Committee are advised on the development work plan to develop our oversight of residential homes and schools for children. All agreed? Thank you very much. I think that brings us to the end of the... yeah, we're now going to be coming on to the work programme. Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, so let's... which is on page... 202. Now, I don't know of any further reports that can actually get onto the agenda for March. Has anyone got any comments on that at all? I think it's going to be sort of quite full already. Has anyone got anything? No, thank you. I think we'll leave that one in as it is. And that probably brings this meeting to a close. I do thank everyone and thank you for being patient with me. The time is now 7 minutes past 9. And I wish everyone a good evening. Thank you very much. Oh, Janet.
Sorry, just one thing. There's, the agenda's quite low for March, so it might be helpful if we have a meeting outside of this to discuss any other agenda items that we might want to put on there, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely, yes, of course. Thank you.